Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. In today's video we have a fantastic presentation by Kira Sutherland titled The Healer Within, using natural therapies to support the natal chart. As a reminder, our winter term classes are still open for registration, so if you'd like to learn more, please visit keplercollege.org. And lastly, we wish to apologize to those of you who tried to attend the presentation live. The webinar was so popular that we were full to capacity. So please accept our apologies and we hope you enjoy this recording. Thank you.
Let me get going with the healer within. I love this idea of doing this in January. And the way I've written this lecture, this is not high-end technical medical astrology. That's for classes and things like that. This is really, let's go to some basics about your natal chart or your client's natal charts and how can you support yourself via certain aspects, or I shouldn't say aspects, by certain planets and the ascendant in your chart. So today is much more about how to nourish yourself than it is picking apart really technical medical astrology charts. So I hope you enjoy this. I think, no New Year's resolutions, but it's a great time to kind of take some energy for yourself, which you are doing by coming to a lecture on health and astrology, and be gentle with yourself with some of these things and have a little play with it over the next few weeks or months or whatever. Okay, let's see if this will let me change the slide. Here we go. Just a note of caution. My lectures are for historical and educational purposes. This lecture is by no means here to treat medical conditions. If you have any medical conditions, if you have any questions, please go seek qualified practitioner. But for making major health changes or taking new medications or supplements, be aware natural therapies can interact with regular medications. They can interact with each other. Be very cautious with what you do. And this lecture is just education. It's not meant for treatment. So Heinrich Doth, I should actually put an umlaut over one of his A's, but he is a very old medical astrologer, as in over 100 years old. Well, sorry, his books are 100 years old. But I love this, and I love this statement. The planets symbolize some energy that must be expressed in our lives if we are to realize our truest and highest potential. Blocking or frustrating the expression of such energy usually causes pain and disease in one form or another. Now, another caveat, medical astrology can feel really intense. It can feel really negative. We're going to go through some things and it's like, oh, you can have a problem here. Or that could be, well, we're not doing too many ailments today, but as you look through your own chart and read medical astrology, or you work with clients, be very cautious with how you word things. We can easily scare people and plant the seed of fear if we say things incorrectly to our clients or to ourselves. So be very cautious with how you approach medical astrology. It is not just doom and gloom and there to tell you horrible things about your chart. Today's lecture is very much about this is who you are and this is how you can support yourself. I do come from, originally, I studied more modern astrology, and then I went back and did my studies more in traditional astrology. Medical astrology, obviously, its roots come from very traditional astrology, but it also needs to be evolving as we understand more about the human body and how the organs work, and what we understand about planetary rulerships and astrology in general. So what you're getting today is a really big mix between also medical astrology and how I operate as an Australian naturopath and whatever else my qualifications are. So this is really a mix, and it's kind of naturopathic astrology. I maybe should be titling it, but anyway, here we go. So these are some key words for you. Sometimes I'm going to put up lists that I'm not going to delve really deeply into, but these are key words, actually from Heinrich Doth's book, that give a feel for each of the planets and kind of one of their basic words to describe how that planet operates. Honestly, I could have 30 slides on every planet and what they're about and what they rule, but these are just great key words to kind of, I teach, when I teach my students, this is very much the wording we kind of need to go over and remember. But again, there's 50 other definitions I could put under each word. I'm not actually even going to focus on those words today because we're really going to do sun, moon, and ascendant. What I do want to not remind you of, because you probably haven't studied naturopathy, or maybe some of you have, but I think these are these amazing principles of naturopathic medicine. So if you were in your first day, at least in Australia, where I teach naturopathy as well, these are some of the first things you learn in naturopathic medicine. You probably learn a lot of these in regular medicine as well, but I think these are very applicable ideas also to the astrologer. And if you're working with health astrology, this also comes into play. So first, do no harm. I've kind of talked about that already, being really cautious with what you're saying to your clients and not scaring them. Every year, I have at least 2 or 3 clients who have been, put into a fear state over, oh, that transit could be Cancer. Well, that transit could also be something happening to somebody else in your life. It could be not to do with your physical body. It could be due to mental or emotional. So, please be really cautious with how you say things to your clients and how you say things to yourself. Our second thing, healing power of nature. Now, I'm a naturopath and I love natural medicine and nutrition. I'm also very pro modern medicine, and so I'm not one or the other, but the healing power of nature, letting the body try to get back to its best and optimum state. And a lot of times that doesn't happen instantly. In the world we live in today, we want things instantly. We want the pill to fix it, or the certain diet to make everything all better. And what we need to remember is nature takes its sweet time once you are doing the right things to assist your body. And so, yes, natural medicines are amazing, but this is also about allowing the body its rhythm and its cycles, i.e. the moon or planetary cycles also can come into play here, about letting the body have its time to take care of itself. Number 3, treating the cause. People will come, or you will get ailments. Say somebody has eczema, or eczema, as we say in Australia, or a skin issue. Now, yes, if it's itchy, you want to put something on it to stop it itching. But we also want to look at, why is this person having a skin ailment? Why are they getting eczema and being itchy? If I just put cortisone cream on it to stop the itch and it goes away, that's lovely. But why was it there in the first place? What were you doing? What were you coming into contact with that was causing that? What are you eating that's maybe upsetting your body? And the skin is actually just the symptom, or as we say, the signpost asking us to take a look. A lot of our symptoms are actually the body asking for help, and we need to go deeper into why something's happening. And this is one of my favorite things about using, my skill set as a naturopath, but especially my skill set in medical astrology, because often once you understand medical astrology better, you can go back to the natal chart or to transits, progressions, or whatever you're using, and you can look at not just the planet maybe causing the issue, but somebody's underlying constitution, their your constitutional health is what you were born with, and maybe why you have weaknesses in certain areas. And I think the natal chart is just this incredible map for seeing causes or the system that's really stressed in somebody and that needs support. Treating the whole person, again, it's not just that you're having panic attacks or you're having a skin problem. It's looking at the whole person, looking at the mind, the body, the spirit, mental, emotional, and how all of that is impacting on someone's health. We're not, you know, a lot of times, how do I want to explain this? You know, specialists are amazing because they're specialists, but they, like a cardiovascular, you know, a cardiologist is going to look mainly at the heart and circulation, and anything beyond that is not their domain. And one of the important things is, you know, everything is attached, every system is attached to another system. And so everything influences the whole. Practitioner is teacher, obviously, and that can be, you know, health practitioners, that can be astrologers. We are really, my job, I always say to my clients, is I'm not here to make you always need me. I am here to teach you how to take care of yourself so you can go away and be your own practitioner. And I think that's really empowering. And I think as astrologers, we have that amazing ability as well, as to teach people about themselves and their habits or their strengths or weaknesses. And, you know, I think astrology for me made me a lot easier on myself and a lot softer, because it allowed me to accept who I was and then work with it from there. And it makes me softer with others as well. But yeah, your clients should eventually not need you, and then they can, you know, call you once a year for transits or whatever's going on. But yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to look at that. And I just thought, if you haven't seen those principles before, they're just a beautiful way to look at your own health. If you're doing any form of medical astrology reading, also to take these things into account. Kind of my last slide really on naturopathy, and then I promise we'll hit, or natural healing, we will hit the astrology. But in naturopathy, we talk about something called the holistic triad. And yes, I'm sure the Virgos are all freaking out that I've spelled holistic with a W, not just with an H, but you can actually spell it either way. I tend to spell the word holistic with a WH because it means whole, rather than a like cutting a hole in something, but whichever way you want to spell it. In naturopathy, we say the holistic triad is the mind, the body, and the spirit. And we, you know, we're not just a physical, we are mental, we are emotional, we are our soul, and we have this whole intertwined being that when we get out of sorts physically, our emotions and our mental state can also get out of sorts. They kind of pull each other out of balance. Also, when we work on one of these levels, when we work on the physical or we work on the, you know, emotional in a positive way, we can also help pull all of these areas back into balance. You know, they're that interconnectedness. And that's how actually the physical body works. And so, you know, as astrologers, I always want to bring this up, because even if you don't have a medical background, you understand astrology psychologically or emotionally. You know how to talk to somebody, and sometimes we can't fix what's going on with somebody's body physically, but we can work with them emotionally and mentally to help that part of the chart feel better, and in turn might ease some of the pressure on the physical body. So I've pretty much covered all of these. I will often say a lot of things that are in the slide that's about to come up. But what I also want to remind everybody is your health is not a moment. It's not a point. Your health is like this continuum of that basic line I have down there. And you know, if we have optimum health at one end and really bad health at the other end, or death, every day, every hour, every meal we eat, everything we choose to do exercise wise, everything we choose to, you know, drink or think or feel, not always at our in our control, but all of these things will move us in one direction or another on this continuum. And it's not about making huge leaps every day in the right direction. It's Health is really about all those little choices we make every moment that we can be in control of. And so to be gentle with yourself on this journey. Okay, just gotta watch myself and my timing. I'm known for going long. So the health centers I want to work on, there's a million other things to look at in medical astrology. There's, months and months of study or years of study that can be done on it. But 3 of the really big things that you can work on for yourself or with your clients, 3 things that if you support will go a long way to helping bring your vibrational, constitutional health up better, is the first house and the ascendant, which we'll get into right away, the moon, and the sun. And these are 3 of my favorite things just to work on with my clients and just support there. I challenge you after the lecture to go and spend a week working on your ascendant and supporting it with foods or other things you've learned, or spend the next week working on your moon. Don't try to do it all at once. Okay, so let's talk about the ascendant. We always talk in regular astrology. There's regular astrology and medical astrology, just so you're clear on my wording. In regular astrology, we all know the ascendant is, the mask you wear, the filter you look things through. But in medical astrology and regular astrology, this is what we think of ourselves. The ascendant actually, that doorway to the chart, rules your physical body. So a lot of times, you might have this really strong sun sign, but your ascendant isn't as strong physically. And that's where people have more health ailments than expected. But the ascendant and the first house very much rules the physical body. What we look like is very, I'm missing a word here with my Mercury retrograde going on. What we appear like, our appearance is very mutated by, mutated is the right word, but anyway, very much we will look like our ascendant even more than when we'll look like our sun. Sometimes the moon will come into play as well, or other planets that might be sitting near the ascendant. If you read a lot of the old books on appearance and rising signs, just be aware who wrote the book and what their background is, or where they're getting their sources. There's most of the appearance and descriptions come from a very Anglo-Saxon European description, and we are all, such different ethnicities and cultures. It's not always going to fit. So be aware of that with the old books. The ascendant is very much about your constitutional health, how strong your core energy is. And don't freak out if you don't have a strong constitution. People with strong constitutions, it's amazing. I'm highly jealous. I'm not one of those people, but they can push and push and push and not always do the right things, food-wise or exercise, and they don't get very sick. They seem to just keep going. Once they hit their 50s, their 60s and beyond, stuff does tend to go wrong. And the problem is, or can go wrong, not does. The problem is they don't know how to take care of themselves. They haven't had to have been so aware of it. And so they make harder patients, and it's harder for them because they haven't had to focus on things like that. Whereas if you come from a middle of the road constitution or slightly weaker, you have always had to focus on your health on a daily or weekly basis. And in some ways, that's incredible for your health because you've learned to do that little adjustment. Our rising sign or ascendant is very much the nature of the ailments we often experience. Yes, you can have a transit to a different planet and have another ailment. Things can come from any planet in the chart, from any house. But in general, the mode, the cardinal, fixed, or mutable mode that is in charge of your ascendant will often be a real weaker spot medically. We don't just look at the ascendant, we look at the opposite sign to the ascendant. We're going to look at the square to the ascendant as well. And so somebody with, a mutable sign, or like Pisces on the ascendant, is gonna, health-wise, you're really gonna look at those ailments more than their sun sign. We tend to really, do our sun sign well. So it's not always where the ailments come from. It's often with that ascendant. And the other thing that's not written about much, but I've definitely noticed, especially in the last 10 years, is, the first house and Aries. Oh, let me also back up. People always talk about hating cookie cutter astrology, and I totally agree. Sign does not equal house, does not equal planet. Absolutely. Except when we're looking at medical astrology, there is a great amount of crossover between body rulerships of the signs, body rulerships or areas of zones of the body ruled by houses, and then the ruling planet of that sign also has some of the same rulership. And I kind of freaked out when people kept talking about cookie cutter astrology and having a go. And I was like, oh my God, but that's what's happening in medical astrology. And I've seen it. And I went back and scoured through Deb Holding's House's book, and she talks about it. She talks about how there is great crossover between sign, its original ruling house, so like Aries to the first house, to its ruling planet. Jane Ritter Patrick, who's written Handbook of Medical Astrology, one of my all-time favorite medical astrology books, talks about these as factors. Like factor 1 is Aries, the first house, Mars, factor 2, and so on. Judith Hill also talks about them as zones. So just realized I will interweave some of that within this lecture. But when we get stressed, let's get back to the first house. When you get stressed, your body physically reacts. Your adrenal glands, which just sit on top of your kidneys, go pumping into action, and your body pumps out cortisol and adrenaline and all these things. But when we get stressed, what I want you to think about in medical astrology is we ricochet straight to the ascendant in the first house, because the adrenal glands are ruled by the first house. And so we kind of come in to go in, when we get stressed, our body gets ready to go into battle. And the way I want you to think about the ascendant as well is it's like, we say the filter that you look through, but it's also like the shield that we protect ourselves with. And we come into battle, like if we were all Viking warriors, we would come into battle with a shield, and that shield is your ascendant. That's how you protect your physical body. And I think it's a great way to think about the ascendant. But when we're stressed, it comes straight back into this ricochet to the first house. And we use a lot of our first house while we're under stress. We also use a lot of the sixth house, but we'll talk about that later.
Kira, we have a few questions.
Oh,
if
sure.
you would like to take some.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
There's a few people asking about the house system that you use.
Yeah, always. Yes. Okay. I want you to use any house system that works for you. I'm an agnostic, which is going to drive some people crazy when it comes to house systems. I was traditionally taught Placidus because I was taught more modern astrology. You go back to traditional, you've got whole sign. I will also, so sometimes I use Placidus, sometimes I use whole sign. Sometimes I'll use Regiomontanus because that's more traditional medical. But honestly, it's up to you which works best for you. I will be honest, I most of the time stay with Placidus unless someone needs me to move, because I have yet to not find what I'm looking for within that house system. But if whole sign is your baby, go for it.
So kind of along that lines, if somebody moves or or if you have, your rising sign, but then it's in a degree where most of the degrees in the first house are a different sign. Do you look at both signs, and then the relocation question too?
Great question. So relocation charts are interesting, but I want you to think of them as like icing or frosting on a cake. You are your natal chart, and I think you will always be that and embody that first. I rarely look at a relocated chart for health things. And I've relocated completely across the globe from where I was born, but there is something beautiful about your natal chart. Second half of that question, if you have intercepted, if the sign changes, whatever your ascendant is what it is. That's absolutely what you need to look at first. It will be the ascendant that is more of that Achilles heel physically. But then, if it's Aquarius on the ascendant, but then it quickly moves to Pisces, and you have planets in Pisces in the first, you still absolutely have to take those into account. And they will interact with each other, but still look to the Aquarius rising sign and its ruler first. That is about your physical body. So you need to go there first. And I'm one of these people who is like this. I have a ascendant that then quickly changes, and all my planets are in the second sign, and they kind of meld with each other. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
There's more, but I think maybe
That's
we
it.
can let you talk more about some other things and then come back.
Sure. We'll try to get to lots of questions at the end too. If you see me fiddling with my phone, it's just because I'm watching my timer. So look, I only have 2 slides on aspects today, and this is about your natal chart. It could also apply to transits, but that's a whole other lecture. And I'm not even going to talk about aspects to the sun or moon. I'm just talking about to the ascendant at this point. So if you have benefic aspects to the ascendant from Venus and Jupiter, it's considered to really strengthen and aid your constitution, and you're quicker to recover from ailments. It adds, Venus and Jupiter are considered benefic in themselves, so it adds to that. I would note a caution though. Venus rules sugar and pleasures, and Jupiter rules kind of overdoing it and fats, so in modern life, I also see Venus and Jupiter probably more with hard aspects. This is the slide next, actually. We can get ailments from indiscretions or excess and overdoing things. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping between 2 slides. Benefic aspects from the sun and the moon to the ascendant. Again, it's going to tone the body, general functions run a little bit smoother. From Mars, it's going to heat it up. It's going to invigorate. It's going to tone the system. It's going to, Mars rules metabolism and how fast we burn up calories. So that can be really beneficial. And even Saturn in a benefic aspect to your ascendant can really strengthen your overall frame, and you can, persevere, and, it adds to this enduring constitution people will experience. And your constitution is an amazing thing. It's what you're born with, your strengths and your weaknesses. But in reality, it's what you do to yourself that's going to make the biggest impact. So again, don't freak out if you don't have the world's greatest constitution. It's your choices you make that will actually, it's like the idea of genetics versus lifestyle, and you will often hear people say, oh, genetics are this is a terrible description, but people use this, genetics are the gun, but it's your lifestyle that loads the gun or not. That's a terrible, but people use that. Anyway, you know what I mean. So hard aspects to the ascendant. I said this already. Venus and Jupiter, overdoing it. Too much sweets, too much eating, too much drinking, too big of a portion, not doing enough exercise. From the luminaries, again, lack of tone or more irregularities with one's health. Mars creates Martian issues, fevers, accidents, infections. Mars has part rulership of the immune system. It's because it's our battle, and how we, your immune system can also be, we're not going to do rulerships of planets today, but yeah, Mars is involved with the infections. You will often see viruses and fevers with a Mars transit, things like that. Saturn at a hard aspect, it is going to decrease the constitution. It's weaker, more cold, more long-lasting complaints. If you're using outer planets, which I absolutely do, you know, if anything ever sold me on outer planets, it's watching transits to someone's natal chart health-wise. So often outer planets are part of the story and trigger of health ailments. So I absolutely do use them. I use both traditional rulers and modern rulers. I'll kind of look at both as I'm reading charts. I'm sure that was a question that I haven't read, but was there. I'm sure you've read these already. You know, nervous system issues, cramps, accidents, electrical issues, psychic disorders, mental health often comes with Neptune. It also can be immune system, which I haven't written there. Pluto, it can be detoxification issues or just really big shifts and transitions. Not always like bad, but it's, yeah, you do things in a big way. So today's lecture is more about using natural therapies. As I said, it's a more basic lecture. How do you support your first house? Whether or not you have a good constitution or not, it's about how do you nourish yourself. I am going to give you lists of foods for each sign. Now, these are not lists of rulerships of foods. Foods, if you really want to go to rulerships, rulerships of foods really go to the planets, just like rulerships of herbs really go to the planets as well. And actually, yeah, so there's tons of books you can look at for, and getting off track here. So yeah, rulerships really go to the planets, whether it's foods or herbs and stuff like that. But I'm going to give you some lists of foods that are great to support each sign. So when you're looking at those lists, realize it's not their actual rulership. It's, you know, because of the nutrients within that food or because of the temperature of that food or its nature can be really supportive to that sign. And so the lists that I'll give you can be used for sun, moon, or ascendant, actually. So that'll come in a minute. So we really want to support that ascendant and any planets within that first house. We really want to nourish, you know, if you've got two signs sitting within that house, look at both of those. Activities and sports, you know, the first house needs action. It needs to be doing stuff. It's the fire signs traditionally that rule sport and activity. And, you know, with the first house traditionally being ruled by Aries and the adrenals, you do bring in this need of movement. And let's be honest, even when we're not looking at astrology, you need to move your physical body. You know, exercise, if you don't know this, just by doing exercise, you decrease your chance of most cancers by over 50%. That's it. That's an actual fact. So, you know, moving that physical body is one of the best treatments you can ever do. Obviously not moving when you're sick and things like that, but yeah. Finding, you know, looking for sports and activities that your rising sign is going to thrive with. You also need, you know, that first house, that ascendant, alone time, even if it's a Libra ascendant, finding that balance within yourself, self-care. You know, everyone jokes about the first house and Aries being selfish, but maybe if we look at the first house as self-care, how can I take care of myself? How can I pull myself back to my center in order to then be more present with the rest of the world? I would use herbal medicines for the adrenals and the nervous system. Now, the nervous system really has nothing to do with the ascendant or the first house, unless you have, you know, a certain sign that rules the nervous system. But the minute we start taxing our adrenals, we also start really depleting our nervous system. And so these are two systems that work in tandem with each other that are very important to support. So herbs for both of those systems If you've heard me lecture before, you know I love Bach or Bach flowers, however you want to pronounce it. We may or may not get time to look at those today. I also use what are known as cell salts or tissue salts. Again, those are kind of a bigger, I should actually write a whole lecture on those in themselves. I was thinking that today. Vitamins and minerals, things to support that sign. As I said, I have a downloadable chart on my website that goes into a lot of those rulerships. When we support the first house, we also always want to be supporting the sixth house. The sixth house is the house of illness, or, in traditional astrology, it's a house of disease or illness. I think it is also, not just me, but not just what I think, it's the house of daily ritual and daily routine, which is what preventative health is. And it's a very important area to also support. And its ruler, obviously. So just a little hint, again, I'm not going to read through these, but if you're feeling stumped and you can't think of activities for your rising sign and you have an earth rising sign, here's a great little list for you of things to think about, to try, weight training, strength training, gardening, things that help, whatever your rising sign is. What does that sign want to do movement wise, and what will make it feel fabulous, because that's part of balancing out and supporting that sign. So again, take a screenshot because I'm not going to read through all of those. And I'm sure you have more creative ideas than what I listed. So just a little thought for you around the sixth house. When we support the first, we always need to be supporting the sixth. They're actually quincunx, or in conjunct to each other. They are 150 degrees apart, which is not an easy aspect. And it's part of the medical astrology, dynamic, that they don't flow well together. So we always need to be supporting both, because they're a bit awkward to each other. And one of my favorite remedies for the sixth house, besides nutrition and diet, is, the sixth house rules animals and small pets. And that is actually a photo of my cat, aptly named Sugar by a 6-year-old and daughter of a nutritionist. But pets are a remedy for the sixth house. They soothe our nervous system. We know we live longer when we have pets. And, one of the things to think about with pets is small animals is pets make us be routined. If you own a dog, you have to walk it every day. You need to feed it every day. Animals that we live with make us find routine in our lives. And it's amazing how often we will take better care of our pets than we will of ourselves. But it's one of those beautiful remedies where, daily life and health needs to become, as I say to my clients, daily health needs to become a sacred ritual. Daily health is so boring. Eating the right thing every day, so boring. Doing the right thing every day. But if we start to think about taking care of ourselves as a sacred ritual, as well as taking care of our pets, I think it's a great way to vibrationally lift our whole chart. Okay. Let's talk about the moon, because I need to get going. You know what the moon is about, emotionally, and in regular astrology, but I need you to think about it medically. It is our emotions, but it's how we nourish ourselves. It is also the ruler of habits and rituals around health. It rules on the physical body. It rules the breasts. It rules the uterus and menstruation for those people that do own those organs. It rules part of the lung. The lung is actually a shared rulership between we think of the lungs as Gemini, but Cancer and the moon really rules the lungs in the mucous membranes, the moisture within the tissue of the lungs. And all mucous membranes are all moist areas of the body. And it rules nutrition and digestion and kind of our love of foods or our food habits, be they, physical habits or emotional habits. So I want you to think about your moon. Yeah, I want this to be a bit, user-friendly for you today. It's not just lists of what things rule. What sign is your moon in? And how do you nourish that? What house is it in? That also has a great influence in this. And have a think about what the traditional ruler of that house is. What aspects, obviously, it has as well. How does that moon want to be expressed? Because as the moon, more than any other planet, has such that emotional rulership, yet it rules our nutrition at the same time. And it's very involved in our food choices. Yes, other things come into play like the second house and Venus and things like that. But in general, how apt that the planet that rules digestion and food choices also rules emotions. And we know how loaded of a thing that is. Also, I want you to always look at where your progressed moon is, because that just adds another flavor or another filter of where you can be supporting your physical body. Okay. So think about emotions and digestion and our connection to food and why we eat. We don't just eat for hunger. It's actually very few of us allow ourselves to feel physical hunger before we go and eat. Most of us eat well before we're hungry. And look at the list. We eat for hunger, stress, boredom, because we're tired and we're looking for energy. When we're sad, we definitely, go for food, because if you don't understand, food actually, besides our connections to the emotions, food actually, as we digest food, it stimulates our body to create certain chemicals, or what is known as neurotransmitters, which make us feel different things. Especially like carbohydrates actually increase the levels of serotonin in the body, which makes us feel better, which is why we will often go for certain foods when we're sad. We're actually biochemically, it's not your fault when you go for the Ben and Jerry's ice cream or whatever, chocolate or whatever. You're trying to stimulate feel better chemicals in the body. And isn't that amazing when you look at that rulership of the moon? So family gatherings, hormones will push you. Hormones can actually push up cravings for certain foods, absolutely. Anger, unconscious eating, food sensitivities, allergies. Sometimes we actually, if have a not a true overt allergy like an anaphylactic allergy, but food sensitivities, things we're mildly sensitive to, we actually know will activate certain opiate receptors within our body and our brain and make us crave those foods even more, even though they're not great for us. And it's why it's so hard to let go of certain foods. Because we're emotionally very attached to foods because of the moon, but also because it's activating certain chemicals in the body. I hope this is all making sense for everybody. So treating the moon, how to support your moon, looking at the sign it's in, looking at the house it's in, but ways to support the moon without it being about food, although there's going to be some food ideas here. So working on emotional security, working on friendships, going and seeing people. We know that if we're around others, how much that will support us emotionally most of the time, as long as it's the right people we've picked. Friendships are food for the soul a lot of time. Nutrition according to your lunar sign. And look, if you're a little bit stuck just go for the element of the moon. And I have lists for you of things that support each. You can go for the sign of the moon, but especially the element makes a big difference. Yeah. Self-nurturing, journaling, creativity, getting near the water, drinking water, hydration, baths, streams. If you don't live anywhere near water and you can't get to it, even a bathtub or a foot bath, or, if you're, we know if we're not feeling great and you take a shower, it often feels like it just cleanses and, it's better. That's the moon at work as well. Lunar, if your moon is feeling weak and depleted, you can actually give lunar herbs. I'm just going to put a little shout out. Ryan Butler has one of the best tables I've ever seen on herbal rulerships by the planets. And I think it's downloadable, might be downloadable on his website. I definitely know if you Google Ryan Butler, herbal rulership, cold pepper, who's a herbalist astrologer from hundreds of years ago. Ryan's got this like amazing chart to look those up. But with lunar herbs, if the moon's feeling weak and depleted, you can actually support the moon with its own herbs. Or if the moon is feeling too much, it's overdoing what sign or element it's in, we can actually use solar herbs to counterbalance it. And solar herbs are more drying, whereas lunar herbs are more nourishing. I give whole lectures on this, but working with the moon and cycles and your health, we get, and especially because it's January, so this is a great thing to talk about. Everyone goes, oh my God, it's January, I'm going to do my New Year's resolution, I'm going to change everything this year. And like, goals for a year are never gonna, I wish you luck. You're much better off making the smaller goals and smaller habit changes. And my favorite thing is to use your moon for a reset of working on your habits. I give whole lectures about working with your moon and weight loss, or the 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off of striving for things. And whether you use, when we use the moon, there's so much written about, we just had our full moon yesterday. Everybody always talks about the visible new moon in the sky and the visible full moon, but going and using your own moon as your cycle starter, I think can be more powerful. I love using somebody's lunar phase return. So when the moon you could use, say your moon was in Capricorn. Every month you could use the Capricorn moon, no matter the shape, to kind of start things off. But I prefer start off like habits and stuff like that. I prefer to use your lunar phase return. So if you were born at the first quarter moon, when the moon comes back to the same shape as the day you were born, I love using that as day one of working on habits and working on diet and things like that. So have a little play with the different lunar cycles and see which works best for you. Again, I'm not going to read through these. Here's a list of some lunar herbs and foods. A lot of them are very carb dense foods or moisture bringing foods. I'm not gonna list through those. There's a ton of other herbs as well. I was just trying to list some very benign herbs and foods. So one of my other favorite things to do to support somebody's moon is to make what's called a lunar water. And again, these are really practical things. This is not technical astrology. Whether you make this, say your moon is in Scorpio, whether you make this at the Scorpio moon or you choose to make it, which is my preference, at the shape of the moon when you were born. So again, if you're born at the crescent moon, make the lunar water at the crescent moon. So this is, this is old kind of Wiccan style. I mean, people have been doing this for forever. Putting out a bowl of water, there's instructions there, at the time of, whether it's the new moon or the full moon in the sky. Please don't do it during an eclipse. Or you put it out when the moon is the same shape as the day you were born, and allow the moonlight actually to imprint itself on the water. And then you can use this recipe listed here to stabilize it. And you can choose to anoint yourself with it. Put it on your wrists, put it on your third eye, put it on your heart, wherever is working for you. Or people will put drops of it into drinks that they're actually drinking, and kind of helping, it's energetically rebalancing you back to your own energetic place. And that's one of my favorite things to do, is making lunar waters. There's a lot of different ways to do that, so I hope that made sense. So let's talk about the moon, your moon in your chart, or your progressed moon, or solar arc. Here's a list. Go downwards in this list. If you have an air moon, we know we need to be nourishing the nervous system. There's a big rulership with air and the nerves. And so there's lists of foods here that are great for that. You know, lots of different things to read through. Being cautious with dairy, because for air moons that can create a lot of mucus. Magnesium down here. Again, if you're on medications, be careful. But magnesium is in dark green leafy veggies and seeds and nuts. And magnesium is great for relaxing the nervous system. Just different things to think about with each of your moons, or when you're talking to clients about things for them to do. Again, I'm not going to read through everything, but I find eating for your moon is one of the most beautiful ways to kind of balance out your physical energy. Okay, better talk about the sun, hey? Isn't it funny that I've left the sun for last? That's actually the view out my window of where I am today, at sunrise a few days ago. So the sun is who we are at our most basic level. You know, if you're in an astrology lecture, I'm sure you know a lot about your sun. But what I want you to know is, in medical astrology, your sun is about your vital force, or your core energy and vitality. In naturopathy, we talk about the vital force is this innate energy or fire within us, that when we're really well, our vital force is strong. And when we're sick, our vital force gets smaller, or if you think about a pilot light getting smaller and weaker. And it really influences so much of our physical body. And our general constitution is also, besides the ascendant, we really look at that sun and the moon and how these three key points really influence. So everybody knows their sun sign. You can look up the foods. I don't even think I've shown you the food chart yet. It'll come in a minute. You can use the food chart for sun, moon, or ascendant, but think about things with the sun and sunshine. And I know this is really basic, but traditionally, taking sun, going outside in nature and actually letting early morning sun, if you live in a really hot climate, I'm not obviously suggesting sun baking and ending up with melanoma, but taking sun and that 20 to 30 minutes on exposed skin is a treatment we've used in naturopathy for hundreds of years. It also gets you outside, away from your computer, hopefully into some form of nature if you can. But this is also where we've synthesized vitamin D. And vitamin D not only is about bone strength and health. A lot of people don't realize vitamin D is one of the, it's actually a hormone, not a vitamin, but we still call it a vitamin. It's one of the main, I'm going to say vitamin that supports our immune system. And so again, very important there. So taking yourself outside to do an activity that your personal sun likes to do, be it sitting and meditating, doing yoga, doing exercise, but actually making sure you're outside in the elements for nature to give you its medicine is it's amazing. You know, in Japan, they have a whole treatment which they refer to as forest bathing. And forest bathing is literally getting out into, well, they were referring to the woods, but getting out into nature. And they did this research, and into the sunshine. They did this research on these university students that spent 30 minutes a day out in nature, or these other students that had to spend 30 minutes a day sitting in the middle of the city. And they looked at immune markers and stress markers and hormones in the body. And you had a decrease of stress markers by like 50% for the people that were sitting out in the sunshine in nature over in the city. So an interesting thing, and a free way to help treat the sun. So treatments to support your sun. Foods to support your sun sign, which I'll go over. Doing those hobbies to support the sun. And I know this seems really basic, but when was the last time you really thought about your sun sign and what it loves to do that's healthy, that you can take it to go do? So fresh air, sunshine, vitamin D, outdoor exercise for that sign, hobbies, acupuncture, and would be actually considered, acupuncture is ruled by Mars, but it's considered vitalizing to the body. And there's a list of some herbal medicines that are actually, that is a list of herbs that are ruled by the sun. And it's interesting to look at because a lot of them elevate the mood, and they elevate their a little bit, you know, saffron and hypericum are both actually antidepressants. Please don't use hypericum or St. John's wort if you're already on antidepressants or other medications, because there's a lot of interaction. But saffron, which is that beautiful red herb. But these are all very uplifting. Rosemary is actually stimulating to the brain. I use a lot of these herbs, but they're all very uplifting and ruled by the sun. So Culpeper, this isn't just a list of Culpeper, but Culpeper, this herbalist I was talking about and medical astrologer, talks about treating diseases with antipathy or by opposites. So, you know, sun to moon, you know, Mars to Venus. But if you have an organ or a system that is depleted, you want to treat by sympathy, so by similars. Sun issues can be treated with sun remedies. Moon issues can be treated with moon remedies if there's more of a depletion of the vitality. And again, you can't learn how to treat all just in one little lecture, one slide. So I know if this feels a little confusing, that's because it takes a long time to understand all these, but I wanted to give you these basic points. So how I support a body. I will look at what needs treatment, but I will always look at supporting the sun and the moon, be it by foods, be it by activities, be it by herbs or nutrients. I'll support the ascendant. I will always look at elementally what's going on in a chart, and is there a missing element that needs supporting, or is there an element that's way too high that I need to antidote with the opposite element? And often you'll want to look at that, especially with the sun, moon, and the ascendant, and how high those elements are or not. Obviously, you're going to support someone when they're having transits and progressions. This is just a general list of things I look at. Today's lecture by no means covers anything except kind of the top, about 3 of these. But just so you have something to go away with and think about. So here's this beautiful list that I keep talking about. So the foods listed here are great to support each of these signs. Sometimes, a lot of times, it's a temperature thing. Other times it's not. And it's around these foods containing certain vitamins and minerals that are great to support that sign. So you can use this list for sun, moon, and ascendant. And you will often find that you will love some of these foods, and others are like on your absolute no list, even though it's good for you. Sometimes we just have that complete opposite. So really worth screenshotting that. And sometimes I've listed, like, Taurus foods are listed under Libra because there's certain nutrients in Taurus foods that are also good for Librans. And that's why I've kind of made my life easier in a shorter list. Again, some of these, yeah, as I said, have to do with the nutrients that each of these signs really needs. So what do we do with this? I've given you a bunch of lists. I've made you think of a bunch of different things. I've probably given you too much information, but if you've never heard me lecture, that's how I roll, and you can always go back to the lecture later. Okay, this is about small steps. This is about supporting your sun by element and outdoor activity and food, that vitalistic principle of you and your sun and how it needs to be expressed. And if you're struggling with the sign that it's in, look to the house that it's in and what is that house's natural ruler. If you natally have sun, I don't even care what sign it's in, but in the second house, gardening is a great thing for second house people. Or, you know, ninth house suns do really well with lots of kind of fast sports and things like that. I know you're all thinking about the 8th house in sex, but that's another conversation of its own. The moon, absolutely nourished through food, nourished through emotions, nourished through supporting it, and hobbies and habits. Look at your moon and how you can bring in diet and lifestyle habits to support this cyclical, rhythmic planet. Look at when you're eating, you know, one of my favorite things to do, this is the naturopath of me bringing things in, keep a food diary. If it's not a trigger for you from a eating disorder issue, one of the best ways to look at your moon is by keeping a food diary, a food and mood diary for a week. You know, what you eat, how you feel while you're eating it, or how it physically makes you feel later. Were you hungry? You know, having to write down everything you eat and drink for a week is really, you know, there's actually research that by doing nothing else in your diet except writing down what you're eating and drinking, people will automatically lose weight because they become more conscious of why they're eating and when. Not that everybody needs to lose weight. Yeah, the ascendant, that constitutional support, that, you know, that area of your chart that's what gets hit under stress. And that's the weakest area that needs an incredible support by sign and by what planets are sitting there. And I keep talking about planets in the first, but if you have a planet within 5 degrees of the ascendant, even if it's sitting in the 12th, include it and nourish those planets and what signs they're in. It's amazing. And, you know, sometimes you're going to get opposites. You're going to have this really strong sun sign. Say you have a Leo sun, which is super vital. And then you have Pisces rising, which is a lot weaker, and it's the immune system and it doesn't have a lot of energy. And it's about really recognizing and embodying all those sides to you. You don't have to be this go, go, go fire sign all the time. It's okay to rest and to nourish and to let your body heal and take that time out with that Pisces ascendant. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. I'm not going to talk about anybody's chart today. We have 10 minutes left. I really want to get to questions. I'm a huge fan of Bach flowers. If you've heard me lecture, I include the slide almost every single time. Bach flowers were divided down into the 12 astrological signs at one point, the 12 original Bach flowers. So this is the sign, that's the listing of the Bach flower, and that's what it's given for. And these are flower essences that work on emotional states, but I find them incredible for balancing out the physical and the mental and the emotional. And so I often make mixes for my clients, or it's something you could look into using. It's very hard to have a bad reaction to them. Be aware flower essences are based in alcohol. So if you're somebody that's allergic to alcohol, or you don't drink and you can't be around the smell or the taste of alcohol, don't use them. But I love making this little mix. I call it the blueprint remedy. I would call it for what I've just been teaching you. And I would use the Bach flower for your sun. And you don't have to use all of these, but this is one of my favorite things to do, is I combine in a mix the Bach flower for your sun, your moon, and your ascendant. You could actually just leave it at that to help kind of vibrate you back to your chart and help you express what each of those flower essences are about. If you have other planets in the first house, that if you're using a house system where you have a second sign, and you have planets in that sign in the first, I would put in that second sign that's involved in the first house. And if you really wanted, you could put in the ruler of the first and the sixth, but I wouldn't even do that right now. I would just start with sun, moon, ascendant. And then if the ascendant shifts to a second sign, and make yourself a little vibrational remedy and take it for a week or two, and see how it feels. It can be absolutely amazing. Or just do it with foods like we've talked about. Yeah. So I literally just spun you through an enormous amount of lists and things. And as I said, this is very simple medical astrology, but health, it can get super complicated, but health and how your body copes really comes down to the choices you're making every day and how you can support yourself. And I know that seems really basic. Kira just told me to go eat for my sun sign, to go out in the sunshine and do an activity. Just trust me, if you put that into play for the next month, it's going to make a massive difference. Health actually preventative health isn't complicated. It's just a little bit boring. So again, turning it into a sacred routine to support yourself is what's going to make it that much more fun. And that's where medical astrology can really be more fun than serious. Yeah. So I think I'm done talking.
I have to tell you that
Yeah.
on my screen, there's like all these hearts and clapping hands.
Oh, I can't even see it. Okay, now I can see it. I'm looking at a second screen.
It's beautiful. They're all floating.
Oh,
it's lovely.
Good. I mean, one of my things with New Year's lectures is it's got to be usable. I don't want to give you some crazy, scary technique. I mean, we can go technical, medical, but that's for courses. This is how to take care of yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have quite a few questions. I'm going to try to combine them where I can.
Sure.
A few people were asking about books. So your favorite books, and then if you have one on medical research or medical astrology research.
Oh, medical astrology research. I don't even know what you're asking by that. There's, but yes, medical astrology books. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I read it wrong. They just want to know, how did they learn medical astrology?
Right. Awesome. So I need to say that Kepler is putting together a big medical astrology course. They're kind of redoing it. So know that that's happening. I teach medical astrology. There's a lot of us that teach, not a lot of us, there's a few of us that teach medical astrology. And what I would really say is this is not me trying to sell me, all of us that teach medical astrology are really different personalities and really different styles. So figure out what works for you, and that's where you will learn it the best. I mean, you probably all know that. I'm telling you what's obvious. Books. Cornell's Encyclopedia of Medical Astrology is an absolute must. It's literally an encyclopedia. Jane Ritter Patrick, Handbook of Medical Astrology. Any book by Judith Hill. She's written multiple incredible medical astrology books. Halfway through this year, I will have my first medical astrology book, but that's not to come. Who else do I absolutely love? a man named Robert Karl Jansky has a book on medical astrology and nutrition that's dear to my heart. Duff, who I talked about earlier. I'm trying to think of what's on my bookshelf here. Those are great places to start. Medical astrology is like learning astrology again. You have to learn all these new definitions, and yeah, start with that'll keep you busy for the next year.
Great, thank you. There is a question about an void of course moon.
Yes. What's the question? Is it just asking about void of course?
Yeah, just, do you use it in medical astrology? Does it have any impact on your kind of judgment?
I'm going to assume they're talking about in the sky, not
like a natal chart.
Oh, with a natal to someone born. Look, if we're talking about natal, whether it's void of course or anything else, if your moon is in horrible detriment, yes, we can go and look at that. And yes, you might have more deficiencies and struggle with some of the functions of the moon. But you know what? That's the moon you have. We still need to support it through those same channels. So if you have a really depleted, difficult moon, or it's, void of course, or all that thing, you still need to support it and love it. So yes, I take that into account, but it's not such a big thing. As far as giving medicines, there's whole theories around when to give medicines, and certain moons are better to give medicines than others. And you don't give medicine. Giving a medicine under void of course kind of is like not much might happen with giving that medicine. So that's where I would be more careful with that.
Great. We have someone asking if there's a correlation between the disease and modes.
Yes, absolutely. I kind of tried to say that. Diseases travel by mode, like thyroid issues. I mean, anybody can have thyroid issues, but the thyroid has two rulerships. The thyroid is really ruled by Mercury and Venus, but most of the time I see issues with Venus rather than Mercury. But, if we think of Taurus and the throat and the thyroid and the Venus rulership, the opposite sign to Taurus, Scorpio, rules reproductive system, reproductive organs and hormones, and it also rules the bowels. And when you have a thyroid problem, Taurus fixed, you then look to fixed Scorpio, the bowel. If your thyroid goes slow, hypothyroidism, the bowels will slow down. You will have issues. If you're someone who has periods or menstruates, you can have menstruation problems. You can have reproductive issues. Anybody can have reproductive hormone issues. And you can have, with thyroid issues, you can have really low blood pressure, which is Aquarius is circulation, Leo is the heart. So you can end up with palpitations, low blood pressure, cold hands and feet due to circulation. So you can see like a thyroid ailment will hit all of the fixed mode. And so we do look at that a lot. You always look at the opposite sign to where a problem's happening and to the squares, it's opposition and squares. I hope that made sense.
Thank you. We have someone asking if you use Chiron in medical astrology.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And Chiron, we often experience a bit of a healing, it's cliche to say, but a healing crisis. Chiron it's a touch point where we need to learn things about ourselves, and physically it gets very activated, by transit when we go through a bit of a crisis to learn something. I love Chiron. I also use Hygeia. I don't tend to use, I keep getting asked, do I use Ceres and Vesta? And there's so many things to look at in the chart natally. You don't actually want to bring everybody to the party, or the whole chart is like, there's enough going on with the natal chart. But I bring in Hygeia because she's the goddess of preventative health. I think she's our own naturopath in our chart.
Well, yeah, along those same lines, someone's asking if you use the nodes in medical astrology.
Oh, yes, absolutely. The nodes are a big thing in medical astrology. The south node is often where we lose a lot of energy. We get very depleted where our south node hits medically, and by transit to our south node can be a real often an ailment can start or change, or sometimes it can get better. The North Node is really where we bring in a lot of energy, and sometimes we can bring in too much energy. But I think of the North Node as like where we get plugged into our energy socket, and the North Node is where South Node is where we leak energy. Yeah.
Okay. This is a question on progressed lunations and the progressed chart. Sorry, it's kind of a long question. So the question is, how do you look at natal charts versus progressed charts?
Awesome. Okay.
When talking to a client.
Yeah. So I will always do the natal chart first. Like when I do a medical astrology read, 75%, well, no, 60% of the read is about your natal chart. And then we will look at transits and progressions, especially as they're activating or causing issues, or they might be where issues got better. I look at the progressed, especially the sun and the moon, for also where we need more nourishment. I should have said this during the lecture, your progressed moon is actually where if you look at what minerals are ruled by each sign, the progressed moon is where we churn through the most minerals. So like the mineral for Pisces is iron phosphate. If we're talking about what are called tissue salts or cell salts, these micro dosages of minerals. Let me use a better one. Magnesium phosphate, or magnesium, is ruled by Leo. So when your progressed moon goes into Leo, you often need a lot more magnesium, whether it's by supplement or food. So I look to the progressed moon a lot for that. Progressed sun is more kind of the flavor adding on to your sun sign, but I think the moon is the most vital thing to look at medically for progressed.
Okay. We have a question if a day or night chart is relevant when treating a person.
Look, it can be, but there are so many other things to look at. It's just one little factor that you need to take into account. Depending on, if, like, when you're looking at metabolic strength and how fast you burn calories, I definitely look at, is the sun above the horizon or below? Is the moon above the horizon or, where's Mars? Is it above the horizon or below? And which is a little bit different to your question, but yes, you will take all of those things into account, but it's not the be all to end all by any means.
Okay. The chart that you had with foods for each sign.
Yeah, I'll bring that back up for everybody, shall I?
Yeah, the question is that for the ascendant sun and moon?
Yeah, anything you want. Where did it go? Yeah, there it is. Yes, you can use that for any of those because those are foods that help to support that sign. So it can be sun, moon, or ascendant. And look, if a food is there that you're allergic to or that you hate, don't do it just because it's listed. That's not a good idea. Yeah, or if it doesn't make you feel good. Yeah. And someone asked me on social media earlier this week, they're like, why do you list cold foods under, I want to say, Cancer or the moon? And, if you already have a cold moon, you don't want to eat a lot of cold food, but it's not all simple and perfect. So there can be, salads are listed here under Cancer because salads and some vegetables contain a lot of fluid, which a water sign might need help with, but it's also about the nutrients that are in there. Yeah, there's a big difference. Yeah, sorry, I'm going to confuse myself if I go on.
So I just have to say we have a lot of questions. So
That's right. I can stay for a while. It's cool. Questions are fun because it's like, I don't know, maybe it's my personality. I love the whole, I get to go in any direction. Yeah.
There were a lot of more personalized questions.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're asking you all to go to Kira's website. Are you currently doing consultations right now, Kira?
I am on a 3-month sabbatical to try to finish writing my first medical astrology book. So I'm currently, there's a link to sign up for my wait list. And so in March, I will release appointments again, and my wait list gets first dibs for appointments. But my website has an enormous, well, there's a lot of courses you can do, but there's the free download. The free download is massive. If you don't have that chart, go get it. That has a lot of vitamins and minerals and herbs and Bach flowers and all kinds of stuff. But there's also links to all kinds of podcasts that I've done. You could spend hours just watching all the free podcasts. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, there was a few people who were talking about having health issues right now. So I wanted to be sure that they knew how to get help.
Sorry. Yeah. And I'm not till March. As much as the healer in me, I've actually been practicing for 28 years, and I've only ever taken a 3-month break once when I had a baby. And so it was a big call, but yeah, big call. But the list is there to go on.
Okay. So we have a question. Will the transitioning moon through a sign trigger eating habits at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, who didn't eat a lot yesterday with the Cancer full moon? You know, you have your moon, and then you have your progressed moon. But where the moon is, I think absolutely influences what we go for or what people choose to eat. You know, I actually had like 15 people over at my house last night. Probably wasn't a very smart idea on a full moon, but there was a lot of drinking going on, not with me, but with a lot, you know, like my husband and I were talking about how much some people drank. And it's really interesting to look at the food choices people go for, depending on what sign the moon is in. And if it's in a fire sign, everyone wants protein, and it's in Cancer, so everyone, you know, wants sweets or dairy food, and, you know, the more emotional. Yeah. I was actually looking at the food that was left over last night and having a chuckle about the Cancer full moon.
Okay,
Yeah.
regarding the Bach or the Bach flower essences,
Yeah.
how would people go about finding them?
Yeah, so a lot of practitioners work with them, but a lot of health food stores, depending on what country you live in, you can buy them in health food stores. You could probably order them on Amazon, although I haven't looked. There is the Bach flower group in the UK, definitely sells them. But there's a company called Tree Frog, something or other, which I want to say is either in Alaska or Washington State. I can't remember which. And they make a lot of flower essences. So when you buy essences, you typically are buying what are known as a stock bottle. And yes, you can take directly out of those bottles, but actually they're meant to be used that you take the stock bottles. So say you buy every stock bottle of the Bach flower, there's the 12. So you buy these 12. When someone comes and I want to make up the remedy, I take a little 25, 30 mil or 1 ounce, if you're in the US using ounces, bottle, and I fill it 1/3 with brandy or 1/3 with apple cider vinegar if the person doesn't want to use alcohol, but know that the Bach flowers are in brandy naturally when you buy them, and 2/3 spring water. And then I'll put a few drops of each of the Bach flowers I want to use into that little bottle, shake it up, and then you take a few drops from the actual bottle that you made. Because if you're always taking from the stock bottles, that's just a really expensive way to use them. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, Bach flowers really, they're medicines for emotional states. And it's very hard to have a bad reaction to them, you know, and they're just this amazing shift for people. And I love making up little natal chart mixes. It's really fun. Yeah.
There's a few people who were asking about orbs that you use.
I stay pretty tight. I mean, obviously Sun, Moon, or Ascendant, I'll go a little bit wider. But it also depends on the client and if they feel it. Like some people are like, that's 10 degrees. I don't feel that orb. I don't feel it. Whereas other people will feel it. So, you know, I really look at, you know, 3 to 5 degrees medically, I think, is a lot more potent than a wider orb. But I will go up to 10 for like sun, moon. Yeah, but 10 is big. Don't try to create things where they're not. You don't need to create more trouble. Yeah, like medical astrology. You know, when we're learning astrology, we're like, oh, I want them conjunct, or I want this. Well, not always. So just really, I do tight, and especially with quincunx, which are a big medical astrology aspect, 2-3 degrees max. Yeah, I'm pretty tight with orbs.
Okay. There's a 6th house question where if you have a stellium or a whole bunch of planets in the 6th house.
What's up? Okay, so planets in the 6th, you've been gifted to experience in this lifetime. I mean, don't forget the 6th house is about work and service to others. So you might be using it that way as well. Don't think just because it's the 6th house and illness, it has to happen medically. But when I see stelliums in the 6th, it's, you know, your journey in this lifetime will have a big health focus, but it doesn't always have to be about ill health. I've met a lot of naturopaths or healers with strong 6th houses. Sometimes they've been through a bit of a healing crisis to become a healer. But you just need to dance with those planets on a daily basis with your health. Make sure they're happy and well heard. You know, I often say this in lectures, but you know, your natal chart's kind of like a classroom of kids, and you're the teacher. And you have to work with the whole class, but every child wants to be heard and seen. And if we ignore a child, or if they feel unheard, they're going to act up and cause problem. You know, the naughty child in the back of the class is really doing it to have some love and attention. So make sure you take each planet out for their little solo party so that they feel heard. Or the parts of our chart, not just the 6th house, the parts of our chart we ignore, we're uncomfortable with, they're more likely to cause you problems. So make sure you don't ignore those spots. But yeah, 6th house, yeah, it, you know, it's like people with nothing in the 6th. Does that mean you're never going to have that health issue? No, just means by transit more things will get activated rather than, you know, natally. But yeah, don't over stress it, but use them for good.
There's a clarification question.
Sure.
Earlier, you were talking about looking at the house and, you know, the sign, and how, like you were mentioning gardening in the 2nd house. So the question was, were you using an Aries ascendant chart, or were you talking about a natal chart?
I was referring back to when I said there is a lot of overlap between Aries and the 1st house and its planetary ruler in medical astrology. I'm not saying that's the same with regular astrology. So when I was talking about gardening in the 2nd house, that's, you know, anybody with a sun in the 2nd, getting your hands dirty and getting your feet on the earth is going to be great, because it needs that grounding more than other areas of the chart. So I was talking about, quote, a natural chart or its traditional rulers, but we have to look at the houses that way. This is actually what I'm writing a book on. My first medical astrology book is on the houses and how much they impact the landscape of our health and medical astrology. So I wasn't referring to, yeah. Did that make sense the way I explained that? Yeah, yes, because people get so angry about whole cookie cutter astrology, and I get it, but with medical astrology, it's completely, you have to have that, you know, the 1st house is about the head, the 2nd house is about the throat, the 3rd house is about the lungs and the nervous system. Absolutely. And so often, you know, I've looked at hundreds, if not thousands of charts over almost 3 decades. Often the house is the area of the body that gets activated, and then the planet more causes then, you know, Mars causes inflammation in that area. So it's, you got to dance with both of the definitions. Yeah.
Okay. This is a question about combust planets and how are they interpreted in medical astrology?
pretty much the same as regular astrology. You can't pull them apart, and their functions medically get very intertwined. And so those people, depending on what planets it is, those people, you really can't separate those ruling body parts or organs or systems from each other. They really, if you support one, you have to support the other. Yeah.
There's a couple people that mentioned COVID more in terms of their personal charts, but I thought, maybe you might want to say just something about COVID in general.
Look, COVID, what a doozy. I mean, there's so many things to look at. I have to think back to when it started and what the planets were about. I really think it's interesting to look at the nodes and where they were when the whole COVID chaos came down. And I don't have those dates right on me, but it was interesting that we were, if someone can remember it and type it in the chat so I can see it. I'm trying to open the chat. What do I want to say? Mercury, not Mercury, oh my God. See, now Mercury retrograde is coming in at the end of a lecture. Neptune being in Pisces, let's go back. COVID is a virus. Neptune is the immune system. Viruses and ailments can go to Mars, but can also go to Pluto or Neptune. Like, there's a whole thing to look at. Yeah. So sorry, thanks, Catherine. Oh no, COVID was announced in the US early March. I actually have a lecture that goes into this a bit. March 2020. Oh, it's going too fast. Came out. But where were the nodes in March 2020? That's what I'm trying to remember. Were they were still Sag Gemini, right? And it was this global thing. Okay, I'm going to go back and stop confusing everybody. I really looked, yes, some of the planetary placements made it really tough. But also, Sag was global and Gemini is the lungs. And when COVID first came out, it was all about the lungs, and people were dying mainly from lung stuff. And then it shifted, the nodes then shifted to Taurus, Scorpio. That was the beginning of it, really. And I see a lot of it because people have typed a ton. I can look at part of this. What else are people saying? Oh, I can't read it. It's too much. Look, there's a lot to say about COVID, but yeah, probably not my best place to do it. But yes, I've looked at the chart. Actually, I gave a lecture on Hygeia earlier this year. I think it's on my website. And in it, I look at COVID and who announced there was a global pandemic, and it was all Sag, Pisces, and yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So the questions just keep coming. So I think that we'll wrap up. I'm going to give you one last question. There was a few people who asked about solar returns and if you use solar returns in medical astrology.
Yes, but only much later. Like, I will look at it just like, and I can't believe the question hasn't come up. I do look at what perfected year you're in. Everybody loves asking about that. And yes, definitely look at that. When I see people in a perfected sixth house, that for the year, have I seen more health ailments? I actually haven't yet, but I haven't been looking for that many years. But I definitely think whatever house you're perfected in, you really need to pay attention health-wise to those body parts. That would be my suggestion, no matter what place it is. Solar returns, yes, only kind of for the flavor. I will always look at the natal chart first, then I will look at progressions or solar arc, depending on what the person wants. I will look at transits, and I will look at solar returns, but more when an ailment happens. There's reads that you can do I do readings where, like, this is your natal chart, these are your strengths and weaknesses, this is how to support yourself. Or other people come to me with, like, these are my health ailments. And so we look at the natal chart and transits and progressions, and what were the triggers and how to work on them. So there's two parts to medical astrology readings, and they don't always happen in the same read. Often they do. If we're looking at an ailment that happened or a situation, I will go to the solar return for maybe also what got triggered, what was the story, or especially when people have more lifelong, like a MS, a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. I will kind of go, okay, what was the solar return the year that diagnosis happened? I look at it more that way than I do. There's so much to look at, as we know.
Yeah. And I think that's why a lot of these questions, it's hard. And I apologize if you have a question and I haven't presented it to Kira, but there are a lot of questions that are really, getting kind of going more into a chart. Detail. Too much detail and really.
Can I clarify one thing, Lori? Because I keep seeing this come up. The skin is ruled by Saturn. It's for, Saturn is Saturn Capricorn, form and structure. The skeleton holds you up, the skin holds you in. It's a protective barrier. The skin for beauty would go a little bit to Venus. Venus can cause skin issues as well, but really it's Saturn. It's not Jupiter. I saw someone say about largest organ is the skin, largest planet. That's actually not. Jupiter rules the liver, which is the largest internal organ, but not the skin.
Yeah. The other one that was coming, I think, in the Q&A box more is the kidneys. But they were, kind of more, I think, chart related questions. And my guess is you probably cover that in more detail in some of the podcasts and videos you have on your website.
Absolutely. Yes. Kidneys are, just kidneys are Libra and Venus, but part of the kidneys also go to Scorpio. The kidneys do a lot for the body. Yeah. Awesome. Oh my God, that was so fun.
Thank you so much. This was great. And again, I apologize. I know there's quite a few questions that have gone unanswered. But we covered a lot today, and I highly recommend you check out Kira's website and get her free material. And if you'd like a consultation, get on her wait list. And then if you want to watch the replay of this webinar, we will have that posted hopefully by, what is today? Saturday. So hopefully by Monday or Tuesday.
Is it Sunday? Today's Sunday, isn't it? Is it Sunday or Saturday?
Saturday. It's Mercury retrograde.
I don't even know where I am. Oh my God.
But that's true. It depends on where you are in the world, right? Because
for the Australians, it's Sunday morning.
Right. Yes.
And keep in mind that Kira is going to be teaching class with Kepler College. We don't have a date to announce that yet, but look for it in the future.
Yeah, me too. Really looking forward to it. And thank you, Kepler, for having me. This is my first lecture for Kepler.
Oh, well, we're very happy to have you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So keep a lookout. We'll have more from Kira coming up soon. But in the meantime, you can find this on YouTube. And what was you want to say your website again where they can find you?
Yep. My website is astrologyofhealth.com. But if you literally Google Kira Sutherland astrologer, it'll come up.
Yes.
And come find me on Instagram. I'm trying to do more videos, but yeah.
Okay, there you go. And hopefully you're on the Kepler College newsletter, but if you're not, you can sign up at our website, keplercollege.org, and I will include a link to today's webinar once it's posted.
Awesome.
Okay, Thanks
for having me. Happy New Year, everybody. Slow and steady, not big things, little things.
All right, thanks everyone.
All right, see you later.
Bye.